Hello and welcome to the September book club meeting, even though it's October. And we're going to be discussing today The Young Team by Graeme Armstrong. It's a fairly hard-hitting book set in the sort of outskirts of Glasgow, and it's the author's own personal experience of gangs and some very sort of troubled lifestyles. Today I'm joined by Alex, Jayne and Col. And I think we'll start off perhaps just going around everybody with just give us a little snapshot of what you felt and thought about the book and you know how it hit you. So shall we start with Alex? Do you want to give us a quick outline?
I think it's a very authentic narration of Scottish accent, and it helps with the fact that it's been read by the author as well, which is a nice change. But I must admit, because I've been busy doing other things, I'm only about a third of the way through the book, but I've really enjoyed what I've read so far. But it seems to be formulaic gangland is the way I describe it, and I don't know how it's going to end, but I think to me it doesn't seem to be going anywhere. It just seems to be following the formula, if you know what I mean.
Yeah. Well, it's interesting. I'm glad you did the audio version of it, because it's the sort of thing that, especially with being read by the author, would add a lot of authenticity to it. And I think it's probably a very different experience to reading either on the tablet or the actual physical book. So it's, even though you didn't finish it, it's useful to have your impressions of how far you got, Alex. What about you, Jayne? What was your impression of it?
No, absolutely the opposite to Alex. I can't stand the narrator, so I haven't listened to more than a chapter of it because it just grated, which is really bad because one of my best friends is Glaswegian.
Yeah.
But this is so much of a put-on accent and desperate to try and throw in the local dialect that nobody else would know, to what I could see was no effect at all, that it just got binned after a chapter. I'm trying to take it around the house with me and do chores, and then I tried sitting down with it again with knitting, so I was sat concentrating on it. Yeah. No, nowhere near. It's gone in bed. I have got the physical copy from elsewhere, so I might give it a try if everybody else is worth a try, but the narration was just too bad.
That's I can imagine it's hard going because it's a bit sort of a monotone and very much on one level. So
the downside of it being the author, I listen to an awful lot of audiobooks, and it's usually the one where the author is trying to read it that are the ones that completely fail because they don't know how to read. It's a skill.
Yes,
and that's why you employ people like Stephen Fry to read it. They can do a proper job. I've just done an advanced reading copy of a book for an American lady, I think, and again she was reading it. It was a children's book, and it was just horrendous. The characters' voices kept changing because she couldn't stick to one, and it just really. You pay people to do this that are capable of doing it. You don't do it yourself. And it's just shown up again in this.
Maybe they couldn't find somebody who could handle the accent.
I'm sure they could have found somebody if the book was strong enough. I mean, Billy Connolly would have done a decent enough job, and I would have been able to follow it and possibly enjoy it then. But
yeah, good point. Okay. Yeah, thanks, Jayne. How about you, Col?
Well, I didn't listen to the audio book. I'm glad now. But I actually read it. Talking about the dialect, I read an interview with the author in which he said he had 300 rejections in a 5-year period for this book. And the main problem was that the publishers didn't want to commit to a novel that was written in such a strong dialect. But he stuck to his guns and said it's my way or no way, which I have to admire him for that stance. But overall, I thought it was a brilliant book. I absolutely loved it. Real page turner, real pace. I didn't get the feeling that it was formulaic that Alex did. That's an interesting thing that never occurred to me. I was with Azzy Williams all the way. I thought it was a great read.
Excellent. Well, I'm really pleased about that, Col.
Can I also make the point right at the start that I think whoever chose this book for the book club, it's a very brave choice, and I think they should be commended. It's fantastic.
Well, that's the whole point of book club, isn't it? You are offered books which you may well not have chosen to read, and it's an opportunity to explore them. And obviously, it didn't work for Jayne, doesn't seem to be working for Alex, and you loved it. So that's a vindication, isn't it? Really,
I did well. Alex is a third of the way through, and Jayne binned it after 2 chapters. But what I would say is, persevere with it, because I thought it was brilliant.
Yeah,
good. To pick up the physical copy, I do have a physical copy in the house now, so if after a decent recommendation like that, I'll happily pick up a physical copy and try that one instead.
Right.
That might be less painful than actually listening to it.
It sounds like it, doesn't it? Yeah. Okay. Well, from my perspective, I read I read it on my tablet. I read the ebook. I certainly struggled with the dialect. I quite possibly wouldn't have finished it if I hadn't been hosting today, because it was hard work. And there were certain aspects to the book which I didn't like much. But having said that, as he does go on a journey, and I'm glad I stuck with it and followed him through that journey. I probably wouldn't have finished it, I've got to be honest, but I did, and I'm glad I did. So let's just turn to a few aspects of the novel and just discuss some specifics. So let's start with the character himself, who dominates the book, let's face it, Azzy. I know possibly, Jayne, you haven't got a lot to go on, but as it's narrated by Azzy, you've experienced him. So did you sort of have an instant dislike, or could you see anything to interest you in that character?
Possibly just a different lifestyle of growing up. I grew up in Lancashire a bit later than him, so just possibly the differences between that much further north and maybe 10 years earlier and my childhood. And those things are always interesting to see what's going on and who did what, and to just see which bits did overlap. Yeah, that's good. Okay, what about you, Alex?
It's really quite intriguing, actually, because when you get to the clubbing side of things, it reminds me of a carer that I had that was, let's just say, he reminds me of Azzy remarkably, and I could just see him getting just as high. It's intriguing because you could see him developing, but the reason I say it's formulaic is because I've read Jayne and Col and Gillian Godwin recently, and I'm just thinking the gangland thing is like following a storyline of a character, and they all seem to do the same. It's the thing of the genre, really. I just think that was actually it's getting to the point where it's getting interesting now, and I definitely am going to finish it. But the character is going through growing pains, and it's definitely a coming of age novel as well. Which gives it a lot of possible layers. But as Jayne says, the narration is somewhat difficult to follow, and at times the slang, which is somewhat deliberate, does get a bit
Okay, that's good. That's nice. Thank you. So, Col, can you tell us what you liked or didn't like about Alex, and how he sort of how you sort of felt?
Well, I've not met Alex, but we'll talk about Azzy instead.
All right. Yeah. We'll leave Alex out of this.
I was rooting for Azzy all the way, because I think as a fictional character, I think it's a thinly veiled story of the author's own experiences. Because again, I read an interview with him, and the author said that from the age of 13, he was taking ecstasy, smoking cannabis, drinking heavily, getting into fights, and staying out for days on end. And he joined his local gang when he was 12. He occasionally sold drugs. By the time he was 15, he was known to the police for assault and breach of the peace. And by the time he was 16, 3 of his friends had overdosed on heroin, one of them fatally. So I looked at Azzy, and I got that interview in my mind, and I thought this is almost like a diary.
Yeah.
Rather than a fictitious character. So I was rooting for Azzy all the way, but because it's set in such a bleak post-industrial hellhole, I ended up feeling sorry for almost every character in the book, because you just want them to get out of there and make something of their lives, and you just knew that they're trapped by nature or nurture or circumstances.
Yeah.
So yeah, I was with him right there.
Good. From my point of view, it's hard to say you didn't find the character convincing when it is actually the character's life story, but there were things about Azzy that just didn't add up for me. I mean, take the fact that he's obviously it's as Col says, a very deprived post-industrial area, not much opportunities for employment, and basically a lot of poverty. Yet he's driving around in a souped-up Vauxhall Corsa. He always seems to have plenty of money to go and buy his slabs of Tennant's lager. His home life seems quite almost middle class, really. We don't know about his dad, but his mother's always got a pile of clean ironing for him when he gets home, and he seems to be in a position to actually make something of his life. So where's all this money coming from? I doubt if it's from selling drugs, because he doesn't seem to really be very keen on doing that, and he does sort of dabble in it a bit, but I don't think it would give him the opportunity to buy a souped-up Vauxhall Corsa. All his friends are driving around in souped-up Volkswagen Golfs and God knows what. Where is all this money coming from? And I just didn't find it credible. I'm thinking I could really feel for him if I don't know if you've read Shuggie Bain, which is another Glasgow set novel where somebody's journey through childhood is just completely blighted by, in his case, a sort of absent father and an alcoholic mother. And I felt huge sympathy for Shuggie Bain, and as Col said, I was really rooting for him. I wasn't rooting for Azzy because for me he just didn't add up. And there was stuff in there which didn't ring true. And so even though it's really him and it's his real life, it didn't sort of fit for me, which sounds crazy, but that I felt was a real weakness in it. Did anybody else got a comment on that observation?
Well, they always say that true life is stranger than fiction, and true life can often be more interesting than the fiction, and I think he's downplayed it in order to make it more palatable to people who might not be used to that situation. Because he's downplayed it, it doesn't sound as interesting as his own biography. Because as Col describes it, if he did it as like fictionalized version of his own biography, it would sound more, yeah. And what you're saying about how the cars make it unenforceable and stuff. I'm just reading the bit where his mates are saying how bad they are at dealing stuff. So I don't know how they, as you say, I don't know how they can afford all these cars, because there's such bad drug dealers who end up being addicted to their own product and end up in all these problems. So how can they afford all this stuff and not stick out to the police and yeah, I can see what you mean, Ian. Yeah, definitely.
What I would say about that, I take your point, absolutely, but have you ever seen a young lad in a souped up car and thought, oh yeah, I know how he's afforded that? It's almost everybody driving a souped up car, if they're young, there's a big question mark over how they can afford it. And
Yeah.
and there's a lot of down and outs walking around Nottingham wearing trainers that I certainly couldn't afford to buy. So I don't know.
Yeah, okay. Well, obviously, there's a possibility that it's nicked or whatever, but it's just the fact that, you know, his home life seems to be actually a good home, and I don't know. His mother isn't present in this book, apart from the fact that when she has the front window smashed, she's a bit upset because she knows it's one of Azzy's enemy gangs doing it. And I just wondered what you thought about the treatment of female characters generally in this novel, and his mother in particular.
I think the point about the mother is an interesting one, because the author's mother is a religious lady who actually prayed for him when he was out, staying out for days on end, doing goodness knows what. And there was one, he actually gave up drugs. He was going to go out with his friends one Christmas on a drink and drug spree. And he decided instead to go to church with his mum. And he promised her there and then that he would give up drugs. And she said it was a Christmas miracle. And in the book, there are parallels with that. You see that the mother is very worried about him. And he does say, as he does say in the book, that he realizes that the drug addiction doesn't just affect the person who's suffering from the addiction. It also affects really badly family. And it really got to the mum. I think that comes through in the book.
Yeah, but you know, she wasn't poor. You know, she could afford to feed him, buy him his nice clothes, and provided a nice home for him. So I wouldn't describe him as from a deprived background. And I suppose it's quite interesting that he managed to get, or couldn't avoid getting sucked into this gang drug culture. But you know, I do feel that, given that his teachers at school were saying he was very intelligent, he had a real opportunity to get out of this deprived neighborhood. It just seemed to me that there was too much going for him to descend into the sort of trouble that he got into.
Was he not just bored? I mean, I'm asking that because one of my friends who has a nice home, and mum and dad both work, you know, nice jobs, kids are well behaved, well brought up, all the rest of it. And the daughter ended up doing what it sounds like this character's do, but the daughter actually ended up taking drugs and then having to try and sell drugs to her friends to afford the bill that she now owed the guy, and it spiraled out of control and ended up costing the family 30,000 to get her out of debt and through rehab. Now, that was what you're describing, a nice, normal, white, middle-class British family. I think the girl was just bored. She worked a job that was just 9 till 5 in an office, you know, finding clerk or answering phones or whatever it was. And she wasn't bored when she was taking the drugs. I wonder, in the environment that you're describing, where it's post-industrial, there's not much going on, everybody else around them is really depressed. We've obviously got the lower end of people that are, you know, being in the gangs, although sometimes being in the gangs takes the intelligent ones to be at the top to actually manipulate everything and make it work. It's like in the Martina Cole books, like you're saying, Alex, the drug lords are the really intelligent ones right at the top of the tree. So just wonder if maybe the character originally in his own teenagerhood was just bored.
Yeah, that's a good observation. Thanks, Jayne. Have you got any thoughts on that, Alex?
I just think that when you're thinking about why he might have done it, as Jayne says, he's surrounded by all these people. If your mates are all in it, and coming from a deprived school, it can happen to anybody. And as somebody who's recently, well, not recently, but as somebody who's been trained in restorative justice, I can see that these kind of things happen to everybody in the world, really, and it can happen to anybody at any time. And the restorative justice part in the early part of the book, although it didn't go to what the teachers planned, it seemed to be what you would hope about it. And if you're surrounded by that issue, it doesn't matter whether you brought up well, you might be drawn into it purely because all your mates are.
Yeah.
I agree. I obviously addiction has no social borders or boundaries, but I would still describe Azzy as being from a deprived family. I mean, just because his mother can afford to feed him and clothing, that doesn't mean that he's not deprived. When you think of the things he's seeing at such a tender age, he's had his childhood ended so prematurely, so abruptly, and he's seen some horrible things, taken part in some horrible things, and there's nobody there to pull him out of that. But the interesting point, Ian, that you made about his teachers are telling him he's intelligent and he can pull himself out of this. That's the one criticism I do have of this book, because it came as a surprise to me that his teachers had faith in him towards the end of the book, because up until then, there's no mention of anything positive that he'd ever done at school.
Yeah.
No, there's talk of him sitting in a class where they're discussing Macbeth and absolutely nobody understands it. But there's no mention of him passing any exams or doing any homework or doing anything that would shine a light on him academically.
Yeah.
And yet suddenly we're told, oh, the teacher, I've got great faith in you. You're not like the others, Azzy. And I would have liked to have seen more in the book about how he came to have this, the teachers came to have this opinion of him. Yeah. And I'd also like to see how the other gang members would treat him, knowing that he's a SWAT.
Yeah.
For want of a better word, because I could see that there'd be a bit of friction in there.
Yeah.
So I was quite disappointed about that aspect. But
that's a really good point, Colin. And similarly, he goes off to Newcastle for a period of a couple of years, I think, with his girlfriend. And this is, you're thinking, oh, this is his opportunity now. He can do stuff there. He can break out. It's not described at all. It's just he goes to Newcastle. And then he comes back a couple of years later. I would love to have known, what he was doing there. I think he enrolled on some courses, but that's just not dealt with. That's just completely bypassed. And like you, Col, there are aspects to his life which I feel, because they're not sensational, he doesn't deem them as worth recording in this book.
No. And I think the ending was really cute, because it shows him going to the airport to catch a plane.
Yeah.
Now, some people might assume he's going to Paris to live with Monica.
Yeah.
But it doesn't actually say that in the book. And previously, I don't know if he suffered from low self-esteem, but he said he didn't want to go and live with Monica because Monica in Paris, that was her dream, and he didn't want to ruin it for her.
Yeah. Yeah.
So has he changed his mind and gone to Paris, or is he going out on a whole new adventure, starting off all by himself?
Interesting point. I didn't spot that. Sorry, Jane, carry on.
It sounds like Col's hoping for part 2.
Well, yes, it's going to be. This is going to be adapted for TV, actually, so that might be interesting.
Oh wow! Yeah, it's going to be like Train Spotting all over again.
Hopefully,
totally hats off to that author. If he'd had 500 rejections and stuck to his guns,
yeah,
and finally got himself published and is going to get a TV adaptation, then much respect to that bloke for sticking to his guns.
That's exactly what I think, Jane. Yeah, I mean, he worked on this for 7 years, and 300 rejections. It's incredible.
Yeah. Yeah. Oh, I'm pleased you did some background reading, Col. It's interesting to have that input, actually, because
I always like to read around a book. I think it puts a different, shines a different light on the the book.
Yeah, lovely. Okay, so we're coming to the end now. So I just want to go around and ask you to give it a score out of 5 and say whether you would recommend it to a friend. So we'll start with you, Alex.
I'd say, from what I've read, I'd say possibly 3.5.
Okay.
Because I think that it's a bit too much like every other gangland book I've ever read. Yeah, and like Cole says, at the end, although I've not got to the end of the book, he doesn't know where it's going. The teachers have spoken to him, but there's no reference to how he gets out of the issue, or just feel that even though I've not fully done it, I couldn't give it any higher, because even if Cole's not 100, if Cole's found something in it that he's not comfortable with as well, there must be something wrong with it somewhere.
Yeah. Okay. Thank you, Jayne. How about you?
I think it would be unfair for me to give it a score at the minute, and I should probably give the physical book an actual try, having only just binged the audio. Yeah,
that's perfectly reasonable. I accept that. Yeah. And how about you, Col?
I'd give it 4.5. I mean, nothing's perfect. It loses half for me because of the point over his schooling. I would have liked to have seen more about that. And I think that was a serious omission. But apart from that, it's been a great read.
Yeah, that's great. I can't give it more than 3 because I have to admit I probably wouldn't have finished it if I hadn't been hosting today. But there's a lot in there, and particularly about the allure of gangs, which I think he deals with very well. The fact that it's all there is round there, joining a gang. It's like their religion. It's like supporting Rangers or Celtic. It's a sort of tribal thing, and you have to be in a gang. And I didn't really appreciate that till I read this book. So I certainly learnt something there. I'm glad I did finish it.
He rather subtly makes the point that the gang loyalties run deeper than football loyalties, because there's a Celtic fan and a Rangers fan in the same gang, and there's no friction between them.
Yeah, that's a very good point. Yeah.
That's unexpected.
Say again, sorry, Jayne.
That's unexpected.
It is, isn't it? Yeah. So so the importance of the gang, it was their life, wasn't it? Really, those kids. And that was all they had, and that's the saddest part for me of the book. Lovely. So just to say that October's book, which is available now on BorrowBox, is The Body of Form and Emptiness by Ruth Ezeki. So that's available now if you want to download it. And we'll look forward to seeing you next month. Thanks for joining me. Bye for now.
Bye-bye.
Bye.
Everybody, bye.